Welcome back, guys. It's your boy Justin424 with another video. Okay, so it is finally Spider-Man No Way Home week. In honor of the webhead, decided to cover some of my favorite storylines, but with some rules. Let's talk about it. All right. So, when we think about Spider-Man, there's a couple storylines that automatically come to mind, right? So we're gonna talk Gwen Stacy, Venom, Miles Morales. Nope. I have eliminated all those from my list, if only for some surprises on my list and some maybe talk of conversation. All right, everybody knows it's like going through an X-Men top 10 and having Dark Phoenix and Days of Future Past. After a while, it just becomes old. So for me, I came up with 10 storylines that, well, yes, I would say some of them are favorites. For me, I wanted to really think about it. So, like I said, no Death of Gwen Stacy on my list. No first appearance of Venom. Definitely no Miles Morales, because that is a whole nother video that I can make just a topic on and really talk about. And definitely no no Amazing Fantasy 15, the origin of Spider-Man. So all that was off limits for creating this list. I also wanted to bring up some of the books that hold some of these 10 storylines that I picked up, all right? And we'll go through those. So what I'm thinking is we'll create this as a two-part video. So part one will be top 10 storylines, and then after I go see the movie, we'll drop the next video, and that'll be top 10 Spider-Man movies of all time, just ranked in order. But obviously going to see that Thursday, and from there, I'll be the judge of that. I'm gonna try to not get into predictions or what I expect, what I don't expect. I'm really trying to manage my expectations this week and spoilers. So obviously the movie drops tonight as a premiere in LA. It's gonna drop in Europe a couple days before the US. So if you're trying to stay away from spoilers, I would highly recommend staying off of Twitter and YouTube, because social media, they're a bunch of savages, they don't care. But that's that. So I did my list in chronological order, just so it would have to save me the agony of trying to actually rank this as from favorite and to least favorite. So number one is Master Plan of Saga. So that is ASM 31 through 33. That is the very famous Ditko storyline. It was the inspiration for the scene in Spider-Man Spider-Man Homecoming when Peter gets out of the rubble. It's a very famous Ditko panel in the comic storyline. He's trying to defeat Doc Ock. He pins him down underneath all this concrete rubble, and at the same time, he's trying to get to Aunt May to save her. A whole bunch of stuff is going through his head, and he doubts himself. Just like Spider-Man does, during certain times, during certain points in the story. But then eventually he remembers that with great power comes great responsibility, and he digs himself out of the rubble. He pulls himself out of there, and he saves the day, and he defeats Doc Ock in the comic. It's probably Ditko's finest moment as his writer. As his artist. And definitely I think it earned its right to be in the top 10 just from that comic alone. But if you do remember, issue 31, the first part of the saga, covers first appearance of Gwen Stacy and first appearance of Harry Osborn, two very important characters in the life of Spider-Man. All right, number two. So that's going to be the first cover and first artwork in general of Spider-Man by John Romita. So that is issues 39 and 40. That is the Goblin Unmasked. So it is the first time that the Goblin and Spider-Man fight where they know each other's identities. At that point, there was hints that Norman Osborn may be the Green Goblin, and it turns out at the end of 39, he unmasks himself, and lo and behold, it is Norman Osborn behind the mask. It's really the first Spider-Man villain that knows Peter Parker's secret identity and vice versa. So that always made the battles in their comics, their issues, more personal. Every time they fought, it wasn't Spider-Man and Goblin, it was Norman and Peter. And the battles just got real nasty, and they escalated until obviously Gwen Stacy got killed in issue 121. But really the origins of all that animosity really start with 39. If you haven't done so, go check it out. It's a great book. Number three, that's going to be ASM 50 to 52. That is the first Kingpin appearance and storyline. So that really begins, the reason it's famous, even more so than Kingpin, is the Spider-Man No More. It is the inspiration for the second Sam Raimi story. That is, Spider-Man came out in 2004. Probably the greatest Spider-Man movie, live action, at least of all time. What hasn't been said that can be said about this issue? It's such an excellent storyline. It really goes back to the tug between his responsibility as a superhero and just the private life that he wants to lead as Peter Parker, the photographer, college student, poor kid from Queens that, is trying to find his love life. Just all that stuff, it kind of comes to a head. And in the middle of the issue, he says, you know what, fuck it, I'm not going to do this anymore. And the panel that everybody knows by now is he throws the costume, the back of an alley in a garbage can, and he just walks away in the rain. And he's like, hey, I'm Spider-Man, no more. No more. Anyway, moving on. So let's go with number 4. That is going to be the first appearance of the Jackal. That starts in 129 with the Punisher, and that goes all the way through his original Clone Saga. So that's issues 142 down to issues 149. That is also written by Jerry Conway and drawn by none other than Ross Andru, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated Spider-Man artists of all time. If you haven't got a chance to read the original Clone Saga, it is nothing like the excess Clone Saga from the 90s. Go read the original Clone Saga by Conway. So that's going to be in this book right here. All right, check that out. So if you look, I know it's hard to see probably here, but first appearance of the Gwen Stacy clone happens in 142 right there. And the Clone Saga goes all the way until the end. So the first whole part of this omnibus is really covers that original Clone Saga. So if you get a chance, definitely go check that out, all right? Okay, so number 5. Also gonna go with the Hobgoblin. So Hobgoblin debuts in 239, 238. His origin is 239, and then from there, the storyline, at least the original storyline, concludes in 252. Yes, he does come back later on. There's a whole complicated storyline between Ned Leeds, Roger Kingsley, all that stuff. I'm not going to get into it. However, go read that original run, 238 to 252. It is definitely one of the better Spider-Man stories of the last 40 years. Roger Stern does an excellent job with it. Definitely check that out. And that is all covered in this omnibus right over here. So obviously he's on the cover. So if you look, let's see, so 238 starts here, and then it covered all the way to 252 is actually first appearance of Alien Costume. So really the official end of that storyline is 251. But nice thick omnibus. Definitely go check that out if you haven't done so already. Classic Spider-Man story. All right, so number 6, The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man. That is also collected in that omnibus. That is Amazing Spider-Man 248. It's a very short story at the end of the book. However, it does cover where Spider-Man does visit a hospital and he meets a kid that is like his biggest fan. And what happens, it's really sad. But as he's, going to leave, he asks him like, hey, can you lift your mask up? I want to know who like the man behind the mask is. And Peter, to the reader's surprise, actually does lift his mask and like, hey, I've never told anybody this. Like, I've been, Spider-Man since I'm 15 years old. And as, he's walking away, you could see him tearing up. And then you realize as he's leaving, the last panel, it shows that he's visiting a kid's hospital. And all the patients there are like, have terminal cancer and the kid's dying. And it's really emotional just to read that storyline. It goes back to just everything that Spider-Man's about, right? You think about his morals, you think about just his high sense of duty, of responsibility. There's a reason why that famous quote, and it's not actually originally from Uncle Ben, right? So if you ever read Amazing Fantasy 15, at the end, it's not Uncle Ben that says it, it's the narrator that actually uses, and he finally realizes that with great power must come great responsibility. And it's been edited, and now retroactively it's as if Uncle Ben said it. Essentially it is, it's his conscience saying that. But anyway, moving on. Definitely, if you haven't gotten a chance, read that storyline. It's real quick, short, but it's effective at the message that it sends out to the reader. All right, number 7. We're gonna go with Kraven's Last Hunt. So that's gonna cover in this epic collection right here. So that's covered in, let's see, issues 289 to 292. It also has a crossover with Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man. Definitely, if you haven't read it, it's definitely a different storyline than I think most people are used to. It delves more into the psychological mindset of what it means to be Spider-Man. I'm not going to spoil it, but Kraven obviously plays a huge role in that. If you haven't gotten a chance to read that, I would go and read Kraven's Last Hunt. It's one of the best Spider-Man storylines of all time. Anyway, and moving on, we're going to go with number 8. One of my personal favorites that I only got to read a couple of years ago. I never realized this was even out there. I knew about the one big issue, the anniversary. So I'm just going to go into it. So Harry Osborne, The Child Within. So Harry Osborne Saga, really, the prelude to it, I would argue it really starts in Amazing Spider-Man. That's 136 to 138. Harry becomes a Green Goblin. Obviously, he has all this psychological trauma and fallout from his father dying. He knows who Spider-Man is. He knows, his father was a Green Goblin. The guy is like all hooked on drugs, LSD, all just crazy shit on pills. Anyway, if you have to read a Spectacular Spider-Man storyline, go and read The Child Within. It is not, however, covered in omnibus format. That is something that I know a lot of fans out there have been screaming for Marvel to finally just release DeMatteis's run. J.M. DeMatteis is probably one of the more underrated writers in Spider-Man mythos. He really covers the psychological trauma that Harry and Peter both go through in those 7-8 issues that he really covers and focuses on their relationship. More so than Spider-Man and Green Goblin, it's really about Peter and Harry. So that's covered in Spectacular Spider-Man 178 to 184. There's also another issue that ties right directly into the run in 189, and then from 189 into 200, which is the big Spectacular Spider-Man anniversary issue, very famous cover, which covers the death of Harry Osborn. Anyway, if you get a chance to read it online, they do sell in a very small trade. It's out of print for a long time, so it's gonna be hard to find. They cover 136 to 138, 189, and 200, but 178 and 184 is not in any trades at all. It's sold in the US. So like I said, please, Marvel, if you're listening, if you're watching, please make that into an omnibus so we can actually read it properly, that storyline. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Anyway, number 9, we're going to talk about Civil War / Back in Black. So that is JMS, that is J. Michael Straczynski's run. It's pretty much the near tail end of his run. While it's not one more day, Civil War was one of the greatest, Spider-Man storylines, if not for just the sheer shock that, he unmasked himself to the public. He outs himself as Spider-Man while he's on Tony's side, and then eventually he flips, goes to Cap's side. Most people know that part of the story. If you haven't gotten a chance to read, though, the Back in Black part where he turns, basically, he's on Cap's side, Aunt May gets shot, and as revenge and all that stuff, he puts his old black costume on, and he goes out and starts just breaking all the rules. He does what Spider-Man never did. He kind of becomes a vigilante in some ways. So it's kind of a dark storyline, and it's really fucked up. Like the lengths he goes to try to save, his aunt. It's his loved one. But definitely, I would highly recommend going out and reading that storyline. JMS does a really good job delving into the whys and how Peter kind of gets caught up, and one thing leads to another, and it becomes the ends justify the means. And I don't think Peter even intended to commit felonies, but he just got to the point of no return where he couldn't go back from what he was doing. At that point, nothing else mattered. He was going to save his aunt. If he had to sell his soul to the devil himself, and that's exactly what happens in the next storyline. All right, so number 10, it's going to be Ultimate Spider-Man, Death of Spider-Man, issues 156 to 160. And we're going to show you that right here. So that's covered in this trade, hardcover right here. If you haven't gotten a chance to read Ultimate Spider-Man, definitely it's a great modern take on the character. The original run starts back in 2000, goes all the way to 2001, 2011. And that's where Death of Spider-Man, they kill off the ultimate version of Peter Parker. And from there, transitions into Miles Morales' universe. Not going to talk about Miles other than that, but definitely go read that storyline. It really is heartbreaking just to see Peter be the hero and sacrifice himself the way he does. Really, when I finally read it a couple years ago, I was really moved by it. And it was great to see how it really inspired Into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie a couple years ago. Anyway, that's the list. Tell me what you guys thought. Leave a comment. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't done so already. Make sure you smash that, the like button, subscribe to the channel if you like this content. Obviously I have a lot of passion for Peter Parker and, his whole world. It's one of the reasons why to this day I read comics and why I enjoy it, why I love the Marvel Universe. I think he's one of, if not the greatest literary character of all time. Obviously, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest superheroes of all time. It comes down to relatability. There's no character that can say that, they're trying to pay the rent and trying to make things work with their girlfriend and trying to go to school and trying to do all these things, trying to live as normal a life as you possibly can with those types of powers. To me, it's just a no-brainer. Because he's your son, he's your brother, Peter Parker can be so many different things for so many different people. I think that's why the whole spectrum of the world, loves him. And he endures, he's outlived so many people. He's outlived his creators, and good chance he's gonna outlive all of us. I think he's that good of a character. And I think for me, it was never better said than when, with great power comes great responsibility. You just can't top that. So there's a reason why the character has been rebooted 3 times. Why there's so many different versions. There is literally a whole Spider-Verse out there. 20 years of movies. Who can believe that? And I can't wait to go see the movie on Thursday, and I'll definitely share my thoughts. I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but I'll see you guys for part 2 of the video next week. Until then,